Welcome to those of you joining us live here today. I'm excited to be joined by Tom and Matt here from YHB, and we're going to be talking today about moving to a corporate leadership model. Really excited to be talking about this because I think it's a top issue that a number of accounting firms are exploring and thinking about the pros and cons of moving to such a structure. Certainly being driven by some of the private equity activity that's in the accounting profession, but it's not exclusively linked to that. And here we've got a firm who've made this move a number of years ago, so can not just talk to us about the process of going through that, but can also share what that's ultimately turned into and some of the benefits that they've seen through that process. But also, I'm sure there's going to be some learnings that they've had during that process that we'll be able to tap into here. So before we jump into the Q&A fireside chat, we're going to have live questions coming in from those of you joining, and I've also got pre-submitted questions for some people who aren't going to be able to join us live here today. Let's kick off with some introductions. Tom, would you mind just kicking us off with a brief introduction?
Yeah, thank you, Mark. No, when Matt brought this up, really excited to be here, and obviously we're excited that we're starting our relationship with Inflow, but also really look forward to these kind of opportunities to share what we've learned, but also get some feedback and learn from others. We always love having these kind of open conversations. So personally, I've been with YHB going on 30 years now, and my history at the firm was always in the financial institution sector, so did a lot of SEC type work in terms of assurance and consulting for kind of mid-sized community banks. And what that gave me was a lot of exposure to SEC, but also kind of corporate structure, kind of seeing how that played out in organizations that are way more vertical. Part of, I think, what we'll talk about today is that, CPA firms tend to be more horizontal at the beginning. And when you try to introduce that vertical, what that looks like, but trying to, use that learning from my client experience to share that with YHB. A little bit more about YHB. I know your viewers are worldwide, but we're a top 100 firm in the U.S., based in Virginia, but really clients throughout the country and even international, but focused in the Mid-Atlantic, and our offices are in Virginia and Maryland. So, we're somewhere in the 60 to 70 million in revenue range, 10 offices, over 300 employees. So you're starting to get a gist for the why we needed to move towards the corporate model, as we, even 7 years ago were half that size, and through some being pretty active in acquiring other firms and just really strong organic growth, kind of led us to the need to rethink how we did things internally and externally, and how we were going to continue to maintain our culture, but also, maintain our strong client service. So that's me in a nutshell.
Some really good experience there, Tom, that I'm sure has really played into the growth story at YHP, which I think is going to be a fascinating topic to probe into here today. Matt, could you just share a quick overview of you and your role?
Yeah, so Matt Smith, I'm the assurance practice leader at YHB. I've served that role for the past 2 years, 17 years with YHB. First 10 years was assurance and tax, focused primarily on the construction industry. The last 7 was strictly assurance focused, primarily within the construction and real estate industry. And then, like I said, in the past 2, transitioning more from the client serving side over to the assurance practice leader side, and helping drive the vision and direction of the assurance department for YHB.
Great to be talking through this again, Matt, and the insights you shared that really led to my recent newsletter talking about this topic. I think have stirred up a lot of questions from people in terms of really tapping into the process that you've gone through at YHB and what you've been able to achieve the other side of that. So, Tom, maybe if we could kick off the conversation with what was some of the initial things that really led you to start thinking about making this change from a partnership kind of decision by committee, equal votes type structure to something with a more corporate feel to it. Was there a particular moment, a particular challenge, or something that kind of made it clear to you that this was the kind of direction that you needed to go down?
If I tried to give you the list of whys we did this, I think we'd fill the hour before we got into the nuts and bolts of how and some lessons learned. But there's so many things. I think we kind of came at this, I kind of talked to you about, what my prior experience was. And there was a certain part of it where, we were growing so much and, we were spending so much time on client service, which, is still so important. But we, doctor, heal yourself. All the things that we were recommending to our clients were not things that we were implementing internally. I'd, in my experience at the firm, had been on our board and had served in other leadership roles, but they were, it became pretty clear that the way we were organized before, those were kind of one-offs. Those were, we kind of called it gigs. There were really important things that we needed to do to move the firm forward, but we were doing them in extra time. They weren't things that we could focus on and actually move us forward and things that we needed to do. So, it was kind of, some of it was thrust upon us with a lot of significant growth, but I think it was things that we knew, even up until 8 years ago, we didn't have a CEO. And about 7 years ago, we talked about needing to get into this corporate focus. So we picked one of our partners, and we really only went half-time. So it was still kind of and when you try to be a part-time, how do you strike that balance? So, still depending on what day it was, depended on whether our prior CEO was focusing on the firm or focusing on clients. So it started to build up just kind of in frustration might be a strong word, but that there were so many things that we saw that we knew that we needed to do for ourselves, but we couldn't carve out the time to do it without sitting back and saying, okay, what should we look like to be able to really focus on running our business because we're not paying enough attention.
And how did you think about making that change then? Was it something that you started to gradually bring this in, or was there a kind of a bigger bang approach where it was like certain things needed to be done in one fell swoop and certain iterations? Like, could you share a little bit about that how we went from where we maybe were 10 years ago to where we are today?
So I mean, it's a journey, and I'm not going to say we've got it figured out. Part of why we've moved to this model is to be more responsive and adaptive, because I think that was part of it too. We, talked about the whys. Like, our industry is changing so much. When we embarked on kind of this evolution for us, private equity and AI, things that we deal with and the speed of today weren't even things that we talked about, but we knew that we needed to be able to adapt to whatever the next thing was. I think at the beginning, so a little more about the journey. So, 8 years ago, we were half the size we are now. We decided we needed some leadership, but at that point, we were very committee driven. We had kind of 4 key committees that ran the firm, and we had a 3-member board that still had a full-time day job serving clients. At that point, we had a fairly strong HR director and a firm administrator that was experienced, but we didn't have a developed C-suite. So they were very day-to-day logistics. They weren't strategic in any way. And we can talk more about that. I think that's been, kind of one of the key evolutions for us, is to start thinking way beyond a 1-year time increments, really get into long-range planning. But we realized at that point that there were significant things that needed to happen that we just couldn't force. We couldn't make things happen. We couldn't focus enough to make those kind of things happen. So it's kind of been a slow process for us, but we went from, part-time CEO, and I would really say what's kicked into gear for us, and part of the conversations you've been had with Matt in the recent podcast were about really the last 2.5 years for us. When we came out of the pandemic, we learned a lot, and we said, okay, we're doing this. We're going to upskill. We built a very strong C-suite. We named practice leads. We gave them time. I think it's important for them to have some client interactions, and they feel that too. But the majority of their time is focused on leading their practices. and I'm 100% in running the firm. I don't have clients anymore. So I think, we really 2.5 years ago decided, okay, this is working, but we really, if we're going to fulfill our strategic plan, we really need to run the firm, and that's, as we've grown, that's a full-time job.
I think
Matt, do you want to jump in there?
yeah, Mark, I think it's important to add to that too, that, part of that journey was a planned path, right, of entry in a very systematic way into what we are today because of the investment that it takes as well, right? As a $20 million firm, I don't think we could have built out the talented C-suite and been where we sit today, you know, built out and ready for where we plan on heading in the next 3 to 5 years. So I think that, that reinvestment that it takes, depending on firm size, is something that's always on the table for discussion as well.
I think it's a good point because that was, as we've done this, that was one of the things that we had to be really clear with. You know, Matt, as our assurance lead was actually, leading our, construction real estate department and was a key rainmaker for us. So you're making a decision to take the leader in client service out of production. And that's a key decision that you have to make, but to see the value and what that can mean for the firm longer term, and not just an industry niche or an individual's practice.
Let's follow that thread a little bit further then. So thinking about the investment and thinking about, you've touched already a couple of times on the kind of level of client commitments that people have. Could you maybe talk about what the actual C-suite corporate structure looks like at the firm, and what level of client work any of those senior leaders are still performing?
So at the heart of it, there's 4 of us that are still shareholders in the firm, that have been pulled out of practice in some level, or in my case completely, to manage the firm. So I'm full time. I'm overhead now. I still try to stay engaged in referrals, and I'm always available to come in and help with proposals and things like that. But day to day, I'm not serving clients anymore. I joke too. Once I took on this job, I started to be a risk, because it doesn't take you long to realize that internally, when you're focusing on the firm, I didn't want to be bad at client service. So I'm out 100%. Our 3 practice leads, the goal is that they are 25% client facing, and then the rest of their time is client focused. Matt can probably talk more about that because he's a hard charger. That probably really just means he does 25% for clients and 100% for the firm. And you try to find that balance. But that's what we try to do with the practice leads, and I think it is important that they stay engaged with client service to know, to more effectively run, our 3 practices, which are assurance, tax, and client accounting and advisory services, CAS. Then, our C-suite is fairly traditional. We have a CFO, a COO, a chief marketing officer, a chief people officer, and then a chief technology and information officer. One of the things that hopefully not everybody within the firm is looking at this right now, is going to watch this in real time. But our chief marketing officer, we've kind of looked at expanding that role, and as we're evolving, that is going to be a strategic role. So even though that'll be marketing and business development, that'll really be a chief strategy, CSO type role. And then all that comes with it, the building out strong teams in those areas, because one of the pushes for this is, if we're going to build this platform to really grow, that means that our client facing principles need to be highest and best use, and that's advising clients, serving clients, developing their team. So if we're going to develop this talented C-suite with departments, they've got to take that kind of logistical and day-to-day pressure, and even some of the client relationship off of the principals. So a lot of what we've been focused on right now is building out those teams so that our client-facing principals and team, that's the focus. That's what they're good at. That's what they're doing.
So Matt, you're sat in that seat that's leading the audit leg of the three business units, if you want to use that terminology. Tom said the aspiration is for 25% client delivery. Is that kind of how it plays out from your perspective, and how do you feel that mixture works for you in terms of the client pressure that's been taken off you, perhaps in terms of the portfolio, to allow you to be one of the true business leaders?
I think it's safe to say with anyone going from being in the practice area for so many years to transferring or transforming into the lead role or CEO role, it's definitely tough. It's letting go of that functional element that you have perfected your craft, right? And now you're stepping into an externally facing position, and you're really focused more of internal and working with your shareholder group and empowering them to realize their highest and best use and supporting them in any way you can. And it honestly ends up, it's your toughest client base you've ever worked with. Because it's also one of your client bases that you absolutely care the most about. It's your business partners, right? And all the staff and team that falls below them. But to answer your question, Mark, it's a constant evolution. To Tom's point, 25% of what, right? Like the whole point is to feel supported by Tom as CEO, our governance being our board, and the shareholders to be okay with that 25% mark. Means more than whether or not I'm ever at the 25% mark. Is it exactly 25%? No. Is it 25 to 40? Yeah, which is still really good, right? I'm still majority focused on the strategic initiatives and the vision, supporting my assurance shareholder group, and also other broader firm initiatives that I play a part in as well. So the transition it's a constant evolution. It's a constant transition. But I feel like we're starting to settle in for the most part amongst the assurance and tax side. CAS is a new breakout for us. So that practice lead is actively working towards her plan to start to realize the benefit of that as well. But it's gone well, Mark. It has.
I think the other part that's kind of, as we've kind of learned, and maybe sometimes it's better to be lucky than good, but that, when we named the practice leads, we found really quality people, but and we really do work hard to make sure that they can strike the balance, because our three practice leads started probably about, has it even been 2 years ago, and I've been in the CEO role for a little over a year, but you give that new role, they're excited about it, and they're hard charging on all the things that kind of were deferred maintenance for a while. And they really, dig in on those kind of things and trying to be able to make sure that those practice leads have that balance when they still have client responsibilities. But the other thing that we've recognized is that just because you were really, really good, and I put myself in this category, just because you were really good at client service, bringing in new clients, developing staff, those skills aren't necessarily exactly the same skills that are going to make you a leader of a practice or a leader of the firm. So one of the things that we've also done is invested in just leadership training for in particular myself and the practice leads, to recognize that running a client base is not the same, and it's a different skill set. So we've had to kind of, sometimes you got to take a couple steps back to move forward, and we've slowed down a little bit to make sure that we're honing our skills, or new skills that we didn't have to have before.
Yeah, Tom, that's I'm really glad you brought that up, because that's something where, again, back to moving into these roles, and just knowing that there's the support system there. Constantly evaluating yourself, your style, the handoff of the functional to move into your new role. I feel like at times, even over our history, that's needed even as someone goes from supervisor to manager, from manager to director, from director to principal. I think it's really helped identify that it's not just needed for for me, for Tom, Elaine, or Dory, it's really something that it's on our strategic initiatives as a firm for us to start diving more into that type of leadership, guidance, mentorship, training, um, starting much earlier in people's careers than once they've achieved what might be, you know, the pinnacle of their career. So.
I think that almost feels like a byproduct or a reflection of the greater level of focus that you've got in this structure to acknowledge that the people who have been appointed to lead these teams need the majority of their time, whether it's 75%, whether it's 60% or whatever it is, but the bias needs to be towards leadership of the business, not client service. Then starts to shift your mindset completely from being how do I become better at serving clients to being how do I become a better leader of people, of a business. And that's where I think that some firms maybe fall short, is almost that strategy, that plan, that ability as a leadership group to make big, tough strategic decisions that happens now in an accounting firm and maybe wasn't happening quite so much 10 years ago. Maybe that's a misstatement in terms of I wasn't working with leading accounting firms 10 years ago, but it feels like with all the private equity, with the AI and technology and the rapid pace of change, it feels like as a leadership team, you're needing to make more decisions and bigger decisions on an annual cycle, if you like, and having a team that's actually got more time focused on that, but also is honing their skills more in that particular area because it's more strongly recognized, is probably going to be a natural byproduct of the way that you're approaching that. And does that resonate?
It absolutely does.
Sorry, go ahead.
And I think that's, that probably is the key thing, is, recognizing, some of the things that we're doing, our annual operating plan is significantly different than what it looked like even last year or the year before. It's more detailed, it has more accountability, it's way more thought out. One of the things that we're really embarking on right now, as we've kind of finally, at this point, we have our team in place. Over the next few months, we're embarking on really our first ever, not that we've had strategic plans, but actually calling this a long-range plan. Doing some, projections so that our annual operating plan feeds out of what our long-range plan is. Some of the skill sets that we've added on our finance team that give us the ability to do those kind of things. But then that gets back to, okay, we're kind of getting back to PE. You've got people out there that want to invest in us, or want, let's want to invest in ourselves and be able to maintain our culture, maintain the pace of that change, maintain some of that control that, YHB, we've kind of said, we want to be independent. We're setting this platform up to grow and be who we, and try to maintain as much as we can what's been great about the firm for the first almost 80 years. But as we grow, so all those kind of things. But the other key, I think, and it kind of goes back to keeping touch with clients in the business, is you can get pretty caught up in the big picture strategic things that the firm needs to do, but you got to stay grounded and connected with the team, so that you're not doing things that aren't positively impacting the team. We have those conversations. We had kind of as we talked about building out the C-suite, what comes with that is we've built a pretty big internal corporate team. And we've done that intentionally, again, because we want our partners in particular to be able to advise our clients and do the things that are most important and the best skill set. We don't want them into the day-to-day stuff. But they still want to know. They're still owners of the firm. We still have to strike that balance of getting what they need to know and getting their feedback. It's very important that we're all aligned and that we're strategically moving in the same direction. We don't want to be a corporate team and a production team. How are we going to stay connected? So we're trying to be really intentional about that, so that we don't, you don't ever want to us and them. We want to make sure we're all doing this together and there's a reason why we're doing it. So that was a key part of what we talked about with our corporate team yesterday was, how are we going to empower each other? How are we going to engage and make sure that we're solving problems that are helping our production team, and how are we going to collaborate? Because I think that's, when you set up a corporate structure, I just told you about, basically 8 functional leaders that have their own teams, and we don't want silos. So, how are we going to continue to collaborate and make sure that what we're doing is what we're supposed to be doing?
I think one of the interesting bits that, around the way you've approached this is around how you've really clearly articulated what the partner shareholder role is in the new structure, and almost breaking that into the 2 constituent parts, if you like. There's the client service component, and then there's the government oversight perspective. And what I think is really fascinating to get the 2 of you's perspective on is you've got those partners, effectively some of those partners on the audit and assurance side are reporting into Matt as the practice lead. Matt's reporting into you, Tom, as I understand it, and then also you, Tom, are almost reporting into some of those same partners, right, in the way that the group has been structured. So maybe just starting with that latter bit first, Tom, how do you interact with the partners shareholder group in the governance and oversight in this corporate model? Because those people are no longer going to be as actively involved in the day-to-day running of the business, but clearly going to have a very heavily vested interest in what we're trying to do as a firm.
I'll give you my answer today. Because like I said, I mean, it's still an evolution, and I think that's I think hopefully part of what we really have been trying to do as a leadership team is to be transparent, but also try to, at times you have to be tough. That there's a reason we made a decision to do it this way, and if we're gonna slow down all the time, then we're not doing. If we have to slow down too much, then we're not getting what we said we wanted to do out of this. But we always, we actively try to manage that, because again, it's, we're not like a public company where the shareholders are out there and you report to them periodically and they have no say in the running of the business. Our shareholders are here every day and they have a vested interest, and we try to balance that flow of information in a way that it's informative and it's what they need to know to help them run their practice, but also not overloading them, that we're back to where we were running this as 35 shareholders all together. So part of that, just kind of nuts and bolts. We had a 3-member board, and we had 4 very active committees. HR, finance, IT, and marketing. One of the things that we've even tried, we've expanded the board membership. So we have 5 board members, so that we're trying to get more, as we've grown, be more diverse geographically, in every way you can think of diversity, where, just age, how long they've been here, kind of where they are in the cycle of being in the firm. So trying to get that representative, because that board is going to, not that it wasn't very key before, but it's going to be very key now about strategy, risk management, trying to change the agenda so that the board is focusing on those key things and not day-to-day decisions that it would have had before. Even kind of changing what we don't call them committees anymore. We call them advisory councils. So we still kind of have the same thing, but we're calling them advisory councils. They're not decision making. But we want to make sure that they're involved in the process and feeding us information, giving us ideas, and having that flow of information back and forth. And I think that's where we're still trying to strike the balance of, what does a shareholder meeting look like? What does a retreat look like? What does my weekly, monthly, quarterly information flow to the shareholders look like? Because it's more information now than it was before. But sometimes you build a monster. You start to share more information, and they want more, which is fair, but you try not to bog them down with it or bog down the process. So one of the first things that we really did, and if we get into it or not, one of the big things that we've leaned into is project management, like actually running things as a project. But one of the first things that we did was kind of killing our old intranet and really developing an intranet so that we had that one-stop place for information that's designed well. And that's been a big win for us, because I think this information and transparency in this evolution so that you continue to build that trust. You know, the firm, entrusted me with this role, but every day you're trying to make sure that you maintain and build on that trust. And that comes with transparency. So one of the other things that I've done, I don't call it a podcast because it doesn't feel that polished, but I do like 10 or 15 minutes every week, just a recording. Hey, big picture things. When we, kind of redid our vision over the last year or so, we kind of leaned into our 4 words: people, culture, growth, and innovation. So that really has been good for us to have kind of a template for how we talk about, our strategic plan and our vision for the firm. So to really just kind of lean into that on a weekly basis and try to share with the group, these are the things we've been working on this week in those 4 areas, and just trying to make sure that they're aware and not surprised. So we really work hard on the balance of information and again, just even how we organize ourselves and what we call things so that it's, obvious what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I would just add, Tom mentioned the transparency. He spoke about some of the communication things that he's put in play, which I think have been amazing, honestly. But in a conversation with one of my insurance principals last week, the comment was made that, with all this change, I feel like I'm just an employee now, and I think that that's okay to say, and it's a natural feeling that shareholders might have as part of a transition into a structure like this. But it's also the duty of the people that are put in those C-suite positions, the PL positions, the CEO position, to execute on our strategic initiative and our annual operating plan, which ultimately is to drive shareholder value. And if we're driving shareholder value, then that means we're also able to take care of our teams and all of our people and take care of them in ways that we haven't been able to before. So ultimately, still, Mark, the root of the initial question, we even discussed it briefly in the podcast I did with you, was just that it's a very unique structure of, they're reporting up, but everyone, we're also doing everything to report back up to them. So it's definitely an interesting dynamic, and it's, again, a continued part of the evolution and change management and change fatigue, right? With just all the pressure in the market and the M&A activity, the technology, everything we're leaning into. I really think what it boils down to is sometimes people feel things that it's just change fatigue, and we have to acknowledge it, accept it, and just make sure that we're executing at the end of the day to continue to add value.
And do you think those partners, shareholders, principals have now, has it taken them a little time to get used to being able to almost wear 2 different hats in different meetings? Or, here I'm one of the shareholders really trying to critique Tom and the team in terms of what we're trying to do, bigger picture, and now I'm in a different meeting where I'm more an assurance principal reporting into Matt. Like, how have you found the partner group, the shareholder group, respond to trying to break those 2 roles up, and what kind of has worked well for you, what hasn't worked so well for you in trying to get that clarity as a group?
So Tom, if you don't mind, I'll speak to that one real quick. But I think a key part of what has helped is some of the communication channels that Tom's opened up. We also hold monthly department meetings. We try to restrict them to 60 to 90 minutes, but it keeps them tapped in, right? It also provides myself or the other PLs the opportunity to solicit that feedback that maybe they haven't given you over the month because they're head down focused on their highest and best use. But now it gives them the platform and the opportunity to share their thoughts and ideas, and to understand that there are still times that we're going to lead in a collaborative nature, or in a, there's certain decisions that are going to be made by consensus, but there's also decisions that have to be made and we have to move on without consensus. But there still are those consensus items, right? And just making sure that they understand that they're still involved in the decision making, just not the day-to-day decision making at all times. But we also went through goal setting a goal setting process with all of our leaders, um, a very robust goal setting process that's continuing to evolve, and we've done mid-year check-ins. Um, it's, just admittedly, as a principal here for 7 years, I never really got a check-in. I never really had solidified goals other than here's the revenue number, go hit it, right? And I was going to make sure I executed and exceeded that goal. But that's just a unilateral, that's one goal, right? There's so much more to leading a successful a client-facing business with the people that fall underneath and all the families that we're taking care of through the firm, and that are taking care of us. There's just so much more to it than one goal, right? So just really opening it up, I think, to just broaden people's horizons of the impact that they even make in their day-to-day decisions as leaders in the firm. I think we have great momentum, Mark, as a result of this change, even with some of the change fatigue. I'm very excited to see how our current fiscal year lands, and I'm really excited, as Tom mentioned, the long-range planning that we're about to embark on. We've always had a long-term strategic vision and strategic a plan, but it's never necessarily been tied to, um, again, the PCGI, right? The people, culture, growth, and innovation. It's going to be top of mind in everything that we do and everything that we lay out in that long-range plan. And it kind of gives us our North Star, for lack of a better term. But
Because I think Matt had some good points. One of the things that we try to be really attentive to is that we have doubled in size in the last 7 or 8 years, and that impacts an organization. And then you're doing it during a period of just unbelievable change. So sometimes we do talk about which changes are changes we're making and which ones are thrust upon us, but always trying to be mindful of everything's going to keep changing. That's, if anything's constant, it's that. But one of the things that we've tried to be really mindful of is that as we've doubled in size, people that became shareholders here even 10 years ago, it's a very different organization. And for all of us, it's one of the proudest moments in your career is when you make partner, principal, shareholder at a CPA firm, and that means I can impact. I'm going to be part of the leadership, and now all of a sudden we're kind of pulling back on that a little bit. So trying to strike that balance of engagement, but knowing that until you aspire or get into a leadership role, there are going to be a lot of things that are going to happen. Hopefully that they are going to be aligned with our strategic plan and our vision. Just an example that we saw pretty early was that during our shareholder meetings, as we got bigger, discussion started to dry up. It really got hard to have people, in a large group setting when we're talking about heavier stuff, really speak up. So one of the things that we did kind of leading up to our new, kind of redoing our vision and strategic plan over the last year was we broke into small groups. And we're really intentional about, how we could do that. And we took a lot of notes. We talk about people, culture, growth, and innovation, but some of that was AI. We took a lot of notes during, 4 or 5 different smaller group meetings, dumped them into ChatGPT, and it, not surprisingly, it spit out people, culture, growth, and innovation, which I think is what we always would have said about YHB. It was a way for us to, make sure. And again, we're trying to provide the right information. So we're one of the other things, our second big project was looking at our ERP. And really had a good steering committee, a great experience with that to really look at setting up requirements, going through demos, going through an RFP process, and landing on something that I think is really going to give us a key data and information source that we didn't have before to be able to make better, timelier decisions and to report out to the shareholders in real time. So being intentional about trying to set up dashboards. One of the other things that we've really done with our leadership team is to come up with a language and an accountability structure. And we decided to use OKRs, so objectives and key results, similar. But we were able to take our strategic vision and kind of break it into 4 or 5 key objectives for each of the practice lines and the departments. And that's kind of how we interact now. We have that ability, and we have dashboards that we have set up with that we really can see progress towards our goals or our objectives. And it's a way for let's kind of break down those silos so that, Matt in insurance, may not be dealing day to day or as much. Well, he deals with everybody. It's not a bad example, but say somebody's not really dealing with the marketing group that much. All of a sudden, we're talking about those objectives and where they are, and you're like, okay, well now I'm informed and I can look for opportunities to collaborate.
Yeah, there's some real things that resonate there because somebody who also leads a high growth, fast moving business, like having clear accountabilities, having a clear vision, having as much information being shared across the business as you possibly can, that's the right information and reliable, really stands out. But something there around particularly what I'm getting the sense in terms of what the both of you are sharing is that a lot of the moves that you're making, a lot of the investments you're making are designed to be able to really easily scale as you grow. And so putting in a leadership team at 20 million fee income to be able to grow that to 60 million, you don't need to 2x the size of that team, right? You're growing from a point. You put an ERP in, you put the right reporting in, that's going to set you up to be able to grow and give you the platform you need. And so I think people naturally think quite a lot about technologies when they're thinking about putting things in that will scale, but I think a lot about processes, I think a lot about reporting, I think a lot about clear accountabilities to be able to do that. And so some of those things really resonate with the way that we've been approaching things here. And I think that's what's interesting is that, again, a lot of people will think of like high growth equals like tech companies. Well, actually, there's some things that, yes, as a tech company we're doing, but that actually you're doing as well to set yourselves up to be able to grow in the way that you want to.
I think you hit on it. Like, I think, it hit us, all the whys. There's, like I said, we could spend the whole hour on why, private equity, innovation, change, pace of change, growth. We haven't even talked about capacity issues, that there are fewer kids, I shouldn't say kids, fewer young adults coming out of college, and even fewer of them that are really focusing on taking the CPA exam right now. So, really trying to lean into, we can talk kind of a little bit more about our leadership development in that, but we were half the size that we were going into the pandemic. We did 4 acquisitions during the pandemic, which I don't recommend. And so we came out of the pandemic and with all of that inorganic and organic growth and said, we just outkicked our coverage. We don't have, not only were we not where we are now in terms of a platform to grow, we hadn't kept up with our growth. So, there was a real intentional conversation 2 years ago to like, okay, let's get set up. Let's get the house in order. Let's catch up, but let's not just catch up to now. Let's catch up to 100 million, 150 million. And that's where, we're asking for patience from our shareholders right now that, we've invested in cybersecurity and AI and people. We've upskilled a lot of people. We've done, a C-suite that we didn't have before, but now let's use that platform and launch off into it. Because even, a tangent, but we've done a lot of things in leadership development that were kind of outsourced or soft skill training and things like that. But one of the things that we recognized even recently was that, we want it to be for us. Like, people would come back from these leadership development kind of things and we would have to level set about what they had learned and how does that, we're like, well, wait a minute, is there a way? And so we've just are about to have a director of talent management come on with the firm in the next couple of weeks, and we're just really excited about what that can mean in terms of career coaching, that they'll do leadership development, but they're also available, that our team is going to see that we're investing not just in their technical skills, but their growth and their career. And maybe, hopefully that means they're stickier, they'll stay longer, and we'll have a deeper bench that are the future leaders of the firm, because they'll see what we're investing in them, not just from technical skills, but leadership and career development, that they can see a future here.
Those are the kind of things that I think really differentiate you as a potential employer in the market, or trying to attract and retain talent. I think that those kind of investments might feel like they're peripheral, they're overhead, if you want to use the word that you used earlier on. They're not client facing, so do we really need to do something like that? But I think that investment in talent is something that is always going to pay off longer term, particularly in a market where the profession as a whole is experiencing talent shortages, and to be investing not in just let's go and send people on a course or a program, and actually let's bring that into the business. Let's make sure that's really aligned to culturally what we're trying to achieve and where we're trying to get to. I think
I mean, at the core of it, we're a people business. We've built relationships, and those relationships build into referrals and everything else. But it's also, Matt mentioned it. I think we take it very seriously that, when people are here, we're really proud when people say they've been here 15 years, 18 years, 25 years, that they could build a career here. So it's not surprising to me that when we do an exercise that has AI involved in it, that it's still 50% of the words were people and culture. And we take that very seriously, because I think that's, we've set up employee resource groups and affinity groups. We've been really intentional about, trying to make people feel connected to our community, but investing in their career. But those are core principles for us. So one of the things that, that we're working on right now is, as we grow, I don't want to just be lucky that we're maintaining our culture. We're trying to be very intentional about, as we grow, and it sounds crass, but we're kind of saying, culture is another process. It's another project. Identify the things that make us special and that we're winning on, and let's not just have it be because. How do we, we're going to buy more firms. How do we make sure that they learn and buy in and become part of the YHP culture, and we keep spreading that versus we just get lucky? And we're not. And I think one of the good things as we started that practice was that we recognized, like, this, talented director of talent management, we're doing a lot of good stuff already, but if we put it under the umbrella of culture, we're gonna be even more intentional about it.
Yeah. It's the famous quote: "The better I am, the luckier I get," isn't it? So I think that's
we've had some lucky moments.
Certainly one of the questions that a few people sent to me ahead of this was around your advice for others looking to go down this journey. I know we've touched on this a few times in this conversation, but maybe if we could gather some of those thoughts here together. If you were a firm going through this process again, looking to move from the partnership model of leadership to a more corporate leadership model, what would be the things that you would be recommending to another firm? Watch out for this. This is something that you should focus on. This is something that we learned a lesson from.
I'll start with one, Tom. Going back to Tom not being client serving, I think that's a critical one. Our prior CEO was great, and not saying anything else other than that, but 50% focus is tough when you're dealing with the types of transactions and decisions and responsibilities and weight that a CEO carries. And that's a leap of faith for a lot of firms. And it's a leap of faith for the person stepping into the role too, mind you. So I think that's a core one, Mark, for someone that's looking at making this transition, to see if they're willing to make that investment.
I guess maybe don't be afraid to be bold. Like I said, we talk a lot about kind of balancing, but I think our ownership group gets it. They really do. And so I think sometimes we may have tiptoed or done things on the margin, or kind of made our way progressively towards things when we knew where it needed to be, and we should have just just should have said, this is what we think it needs to be, instead of doing incremental changes. Not being afraid to say, okay, I know this is where it needs to be. But I think that goes back to even some of the things that we're building trust, we're building better information, we're building dashboards. We really are trying to, when we come at something, it's not a gut decision. It's data driven, it's backed up, and it's vetted. And I think that's where we've gotten better and better as we've been in these roles, about being able to to make those cases and build the trust. But sometimes you just got to give it time. It's a change, and you got to hold some hands along the way.
And communication seems to have come out a couple of times in this, in terms of the reporting that you've touched on, but also the kind of ways that you've been going about communicating with those directly impacted by this, which I would guess the shareholders, partners are the people that are most directly impacted by this, but then obviously the broader businesses is going to look and feel different to them. So what are some of the ways that you've approached communication that others could maybe glean some insights from?
I think, maybe at its simplest is it's always in front of us. We don't do anything or execute anything without talking through how are we going to communicate this. Because we have had some situations where we did something really, really good and really, really impactful, but we didn't roll it out well. And it didn't fail necessarily, but it took some hits because, like I said, we didn't message it well enough. And I think that's also part of, kind of an element of the project management too, that I think we're getting better at, as we collaborate and work across departments and make bigger things happen. We talk a lot about change management, and one of the things that we learned early on was that, actually the practice leads were in their roles for about 9 months before I became the CEO. So, and we were still building out the C-suite at that point. So it was just kind of, and they were kind of really doing great stuff, but it was in their lanes, and we weren't necessarily, not that they weren't aligned with our vision, but they were happening sort of in a vacuum. And then we realized all of a sudden we'd done some really good stuff, but we had changed everything really, really quickly. And so we have conversations about communication of changes, but also pacing of changes, and that sometimes there are things that we know really need to happen, but we shouldn't do it right now because we just did something else. And let's look at a timeline for when we're going to get there, and more comfortably, even if we know we'd love it to happen yesterday, it's okay if it happens 9 months from now or even 18 months from now.
Yeah, very well said, Tom. The one additional communication piece I would add in is to not forget about your team, right? It's not just communication with the leaders, the folks at the top. Without the talented corporate team members and production teams, we can't serve clients, right? And we're never going to hit a single strategic initiative or goal if our people aren't plugged in to the vision and the future of the firm. So we spend time making sure that we loop the entire firm into our aspirational goal, our OKRs, why it matters, the fact that we made a decision that we are boldly going to move towards staying independent. That's all critical information that they need to hear also. And that's something that we're constantly, working towards and trying to do better at as we move forward. It's communication top to bottom.
I think the other thing that, we try to, we talk about culture, but, another reason why, a lot of the firms that I'm sure that are listening to this are successful is because they've got a history of, incredible client service. And, sometimes, there are times where we can get really caught up in what we're trying to execute on, that we do really try to back up every once in a while and say, okay, well, let's refocus and why are we doing this? And the answer has to be, at the end of the day, building enterprise value. And what does that mean? Client service. All of our stakeholders are engaged and happy, and that means our team, our community, our corporate team. So, like I said, we, every once in a while you got to step back and say, okay, why am I doing this? And trying to remind everybody that it's about culture and value. Client service.
This has been a really good conversation. I'm going to close with looking forward then, because you've, again, both of you touched on the strategic vision, the pieces that you've been working on, it feels like you're very well set up right now to achieve what you want to achieve. So could you touch on what are the next 5 years looking like at YHP? What are some of the things that you really feel like you're in a great place to go and execute on? Where do you want to be, to the extent that you can share those externally? I think that we could paint a really exciting picture as to what has this unlocked for you in terms of what you want to do going forward.
Well, first of all, I hope so. I believe we have. I really do. I think we've made a lot of good moves, and it really is kind of a neat time because I think we are right at the point probably a few months ago where we were able to say, okay, we never stopped, but we slowed down for about 12 or 18 months, and now we feel comfortable that we caught up and we built the platform, and we've shown what we can look like as a firm if we use that platform. So some of the bigger things are, continuing the transformation to advisory. Some of that is, specific to our CAS group, but it's really our entire practice that, we've tried to, again, make it so that our partners have the ability to really lean into the client relationships, and look for those opportunities where they can be, the trusted advisor. So that transformation to advisory, the continued transformation of digital, leaning into innovation, so that I think we've made a lot of investments, but we're looking at how really we can improve our margins, so that we can keep that really good client service, figure out ways to do the compliance stuff more efficiently and cost effectively, so then we can lean in and find those value adds for the clients where we can really add. So we're looking at offshoring, so that I really do feel like we're at that point where we're turning the corner to do the fun stuff, not the not the build, but worth the time and energy to get to the point where we're talking about long range planning stuff. We're actively looking at acquisitions again. Excited about talking to potential future partners that we can add to the firm. So there's a lot, but those are maybe some of the bigger ones.
Anything to add, Matt?
Tom said it well. I would just go down my assurance rant if you open the floor to me. But I mean, obviously, Mark, the transition to inflow is going to be huge for our assurance department, and we're very excited about it. Excited to see where the tax platform lands as well. We'll be evaluating that this summer, and of course, inflow is on the list for that. But hits on everything that Tom said. That falls under the whole digital, innovative side, and just really, overarching point for me is just leaning into the data. As we've built out the team, it's been unbelievable what we've identified as the data that we've always had. We've just never maybe had the proper data integrity or the data governance, or really taken the time to step back and start thinking about the types of metrics that we can pull to look at client service, client satisfaction, staff satisfaction, goal setting for principals, changing the performance metrics from billable hours to output-based metrics. So just really leaning deep into data, and that's just going to be a really, really continued area of excitement for me as we continue down this path.
You're preaching to the choir on that one, Matt. I certainly agree with that. That date, like that. Really, modern businesses are driven by data, right? And it's moving away from I'm the most experienced person in the room, and this is what my gut's telling me to. This is what the data's telling us. This is how we're comfortable and confident in the data that we're making these decisions on, and this is how we're going to make that decision and more quickly iterate on those decisions. And another recurring theme for me out of this conversation has been, yes, we're making decisions, but we're also openly critiquing those, we're communicating, we're collaborating, we're changing those decisions, and we know what we're working towards. We're not maybe sure exactly how we're going to get there, but we're going to keep making progress rather than worrying about having the perfect plan to be able to execute. This has been a really interesting conversation. Tom, Matt, thank you very much for making the time available to talk about the YHP journey on this transition to a corporate leadership model. I think it's set you guys up in a fantastic position. we're really excited to be working with you and be part of that journey. And I think, culturally, we've got a really strong alignment here. So thank you for your time today. Thank you for your support more broadly. And I'm looking forward to future conversations.
Yeah, I mean, that was even unplanned. I like the full circle, how Matt closed with inflow. I mean, we couldn't tee that up better. So.
It wasn't planned, I promise. Thank you, Mark.
We don't even need a plan nowadays, Matt, do we? We don't even need a plan, do we? So, gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. I'm gonna hit the stop button now.
Yep. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks.
And I think that means we can still keep talking, but it stopped the live feed and it stopped the recording, and then we should be able